Podcast, a podcast offering discussions and tutorials on nerdy subjects for people who aren't necessarily nerdy themselves. With you today, myself, is your nerdy Tutor George, and with me here today, 2020 survivor, my mom.
Hey, yeah, we're through 2020 and into 2021, which is shaping up to be a marvelous year.
Oh, yeah. So we're recording this on the 9th of January. We had kind of an interesting week here. But we're not talking about that interesting week that we just had.
We're not.
No, we're going to talk about something that actually got released. Well, we're going to start a discussion, and we're going to eventually talk about Wonder Woman 1984.
Which I was told by somebody is absolutely awful.
Well, when we get to next week's episode, we can preface what happened.
I haven't seen it.
I have seen it, but I will keep my discussions for that until next week. Because
I like Gal Gadot.
I like Gal Gadot too. I don't know if she's a good actress or not, because this is really the only role I've ever seen her in.
Oh, okay.
But I mean, like, she looks and acts the part pretty well. So I mean, like, maybe again, there's
she's not Linda Carter.
I don't know if there's a lot of people who can be, but I mean, like, Linda Carter wasn't also going to be that physical.
Yeah.
I mean, this also goes back to this also. I mean, if you want to go way back in time to Harry Potter, I thought the first guy who played Dumbledore was like the best old guy you could have gone for that.
Yeah.
But considering how old he was, that he was going to have to last for like 10 years to get to the end.
Yeah.
You know, that
probably wasn't going to happen.
He probably wasn't going to. He unfortunately he did die past the after. You know, he stopped doing the part after the second movie and then died a year or two later.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, you know, but like
the replacement was pretty good.
Well, yeah, no, the replacement.
It's not jarring.
It's not immediately jarring. But I mean, like, but if they had that actor there the entire time, I think it would have made much more. I think it would have been a lot more of a through line. But I mean, like,
well, I mean, maybe we can get into this later. But you know, when Linda Carter was Wonder Woman, the idea of what womanly beauty was, what fitness was, all those things were very different than they are now. And it shows in the difference between the two. Yeah,
so this is actually an episode where I'm going to lean on you a little bit for some knowledge here.
Oh, okay.
Because again, like, as much as I've grown up around Wonder Woman and seen it and had it in my periphery, I am very much a heterosexual male individual. I don't have the same connection to Wonder Woman as a lot of women do, who have a far more different appreciation and conceptualization of this character, not only in their society, but in their as a cultural sort of thing here. So at a certain point here, I'm going to have to rely on you for some of this.
Well, I'll give you some immediate insight, and that's that on the AIDS ride, which is like 40% female, 60% male, probably about 30% straight, 70% gay. It's an interesting mix. Wonder Woman is one of the most worn jerseys. You'll occasionally see guys in Green Lantern, and you'll occasionally see Superman jerseys.
Do you know why Green Lantern, though?
No.
So there is a Green Lantern character which is gay.
Oh, good insight.
The problem, though, is that it's not the one everyone thinks it is. It's a completely different Green Lantern that, like, kind of is tangentially the Green Lantern, but not really the Green Lantern. But a lot of people end up, confusing it for the Green Lantern, and that's where a lot of that would come from, I imagine. So if you see a lot of Green Lantern stuff, that's probably where that's coming from.
Because on Red Dress Day, you'll occasionally see Flash Lightning.
Yes. There has been depictions of some Flashes that are also gay.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, but Wonder Woman is the superhero you see the most on the ride, and there's 2,300 riders, and I have to tell you, I'm both men and women.
Yep.
So just putting that out there.
Well, I mean, we'll get to this, I think, when we get to the costume here, but I mean, like, Wonder Woman is very much of the, is the phrase, as I've heard it said before, is the male gaze. It's definitely a character that's very much the proportion of, like, men would like this.
Oh, yes, which is why it surprised me to hear you say that, because I always figured that Wonder Woman was really designed for men.
Yeah.
She's kind of Barbie doll-esque.
Well,
and
so
yeah.
so let's actually talk about the creator of Wonder Woman, because this guy is a trip.
Okay.
So so Wonder Woman came out in 1941, originally designed by a gentleman named Moulton Marston. I'm just going to refer to him as Marston.
Okay.
This is a weird guy in an interesting way. He's a Harvard PhD psychologist who's also the same guy, along with his wife Elizabeth Marston, created the lie detector.
Oh, cool. Wow, that's that's a really, I would think, disparate skill set.
Well, what's interesting here is that his wife was also an academic. She's the one who noticed that when she got angry or when she got angry or flustered, that her blood would rise, that her blood pressure would rise, and so over the course of a couple of years, Marston did research on that, and eventually, that's where they came up with the polygraph and the lie detector, essentially.
Interesting.
So, but he's also let's see here. He was also really big into gender studies as well. At one point, he was studying all female communities and studying their rituals and behaviors, by which he was studying sorority sisters, and trying to logic and understand their rituals and how they interacted with each other.
Well, I mean,
on their own.
I so understand that at the time he would have been doing this.
Mm-hmm.
I assume we're talking 30s, 40s?
Yes.
Okay. So at the time he would have been doing this, sororities were the safe place. Dorms were segregated by gender.
Yes.
And sororities were the safe place for women to, it was literally a woman's house.
Yes.
And it's a safe place for women to live. So when you had sororities, sororities are actually where they first discovered that if they live together, women's periods will come into sync.
Mm-hmm. The only reason I know that is from Married with Children, and it's an episode it's an episode that's actually like not in common circulation because of that. Oh. Because that was something that got brought up.
Well, but
as a part of the episode, but no, yeah.
Yeah, it's roommates female roommates who are good friends, who live together will also eventually, if they're not on the pill, which regulates your cycle, will come into sync as well. So it's an interesting thing. But sororities in that time period would have been a very interesting place to study women. Because women who went to college at that time were either very privileged or very progressive, or both. Well,
and it's actually one of these things here where Marston was very much of the belief that women were actually the superior sex.
They are.
And I don't disagree with that.
They just are. I gave that speech in high school and won with it my senior year all the way to the state tournament.
What he rationalized at the end of the day here was that women were not only the superior sex, is that they would be dominant if it weren't for the fact that they were burdened with having to rear and raise children, and that they had all this housework to do.
And times have changed.
Well, he was progressive, not enlightened. Let's put it that way.
Well, no, at the time that would have been the norm.
That would have been the norm.
My grandmother had a degree in chemistry, was a pharmacist, and left all of that. I mean, fought to get an education in 1919, and then quit working when she had children.
Yeah.
And never went back to work, except during World War II. She during World War II worked at a naval base, a naval hospital actually.
And he rationalized that with the way technology was, eventually it would get to the point where housework would get easier and child rearing would get easier. That women would be able to get educated, they would be able to amass power and wealth, and eventually take their rightful spots as, the superior gender and leaders of the world here. And that's not untrue in a lot of cases when you look around the world where you've got a lot of female leaders. I think the most
Margaret Thatcher, Golda Meir.
Yeah. A lot of those.
We're actually one of the slower countries to adopt that.
Yeah.
In that we've never had a female leader.
We've gotten we're getting a little closer.
Yeah, but even some very conservative countries have
Yeah,
had female leaders.
very, very true here.
Indira Gandhi. I mean, yeah.
So, another very interesting fact, which often gets left out about Marston and his wife, is that there was a third person as well.
Okay.
So they had they had a consenting polyamorous life with another woman named Olive Byrne.
So they're menage a trois.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
And they had, Marston had children not only with Elizabeth but also with Olive as well, and they lived this, lifestyle where all three of them were together. And again, for the 1930s, and 40s, like
that's
pretty amazing at the end of the day.
Depending on where you're living, because our guide in Uganda, we just got back from Uganda.
Mm-hmm.
Our guide in Uganda's father, he is one of 23 children. His father had 9 wives.
But again, I mean, for 1930s and 40s America,
it's
pretty bizarre and pretty
very bizarre.
No, I mean, and
America, not Britain.
No, in America,
because his name sounded British.
It does a little, I suppose. But he's also very much, he thought that comics were this great educational potential for children here at the end of the day, that you could shape and mold the minds of children through comics because you had this great educational platform.
Yeah.
There's a great quote here when he made that point of saying that he actually got hired by a company called All American Publications as an educational consultant on comics. This is also the same company that got merged with another that would eventually become DC Comics, which is where Wonder Woman lives to this day, as far as publication goes.
Okay.
At one point here, when in the process of he was tasked with the idea, I was like, well, will you make a superhero? And his wife, Elizabeth, was the one who said you should make a female superhero, because he wanted to make a hero that fought for peace and love and wasn't necessarily always physical, but was always, striving to be the perfect thing. And then Elizabeth was like, that sounds wonderful and awesome. Why did you just make it a girl, though? And at one point here, his quote that he has here about women, when he was consciously making this character, was, not even girls want to be girls so long as our feminine archetypes lack force, strength, and power. Not wanting to be girls, they don't want to be tender, submissive, peace-loving as good women are. Women's strong qualities have become despised because of their weaknesses. The obvious remedy to create a feminine character with all the strengths of Superman, plus all the allure of good and beautiful women. And this actually goes on to what is kind of a somewhat popular and not necessarily correct trope in all of mass media, that heroes have a large amount of qualities of masculine
They're
qualities.
testosterone filled?
Well, no. Not necessarily testosterone filled, but heroes tend to have more masculine traits, as where bad guys tend to have more feminine traits. And where you can see this kind of in a lot of cases was with now I forget the movie here. Not To Kill a Mockingbird, but like it's Mockingbird is a thing in here. Hunger Games.
Oh.
So in Hunger Games,
Yeah.
as an example, the main hero, like
Katniss
Everdeen.
Yeah.
Why I remember that name, I can't answer it to you, but is very much a masculine character at the end of the day. I mean, like, she might dress up to be pretty, but a lot of her stuff is very rugged, tough.
Yeah.
You could very easily swap her out for a male character and not have to change a whole lot about the character at the end of the day, because it has a lot of very masculine qualities, versus the bad guys, all the rich people, are all these, fashion obsessed, preening, look how beautiful I look, self-obsessed. A lot of what we might consider nowadays to be rather feminine qualities, and that tends to happen in a lot of movies, TV shows, and media, where, again, heroic good guys tend to have a lot more masculine qualities, versus bad guys or even just sidekicks have a lot more feminine submissive qualities in them at the end of the day.
Well, what's interesting hearing you say that is that I think back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, you wanted to be a man's man.
Yeah.
And there were definitely stereotypes. I mean, right down to my father. My father would say, "Oh, eat that; it'll put hair on your chest." That the whole idea was being a guy's guy. And nowadays, it's more embrace your feminine side, acknowledge that all men have a feminine side, that the ideal man is more balanced and compassionate and those more feminine qualities.
Yeah.
Empathetic and compassionate and
caring,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sensitive. So it's interesting.
Yeah, because now we take a lot of those masculine qualities. We think, oh, that's a testosterone-filled asshole.
Yeah. And so it's interesting that for the most part, you're right. Nobody's looking at Tony Stark's feminine side. So you, for the most part, I think you're right. Superheroes are still. It's what makes Doctor Strangelove interesting.
Well, if we want to go back to like a Marvel example of this, we look at Thor in the first movie. Like Thor's like a man's man. Look at him.
Thor in Ragnarok is a man's man.
Yeah, but then you look at Loki. You see Loki, and he's kind of like sniveling, weak, preening. Look how good I look. Look at watch me.
Very narcissistic.
Narcissistic, yeah. Like
self-absorbed.
And they're not solely feminine traits at the end of the day, but you can see where a lot of that would be, But
realize that some of the qualities of Loki really come from almost biblical descriptions of what happens when Satan, who is God's favorite angel, when Satan tries to eclipse God and says, "I'm just as good as you," which is the fall of man, or the fall of Satan.
Yeah.
And so I always figure Loki is sort of the earthly envisionment, well, the semi-earthly envisionment of that.
No, and even in certain Norse god sort of lore, like he's meant to be the guy that brings around Ragnarok at certain points here to the destruction of everything at a certain point here.
Yeah.
So I mean, like. But again, it's always Wonder Woman and a lot of female superheroes tend to have a lot more masculine qualities than necessarily feminine. And I find that super interesting because, again, like when Marston was creating Wonder Woman here, he was very conscious of what he was doing when he was creating her. But
so, and I'm going to take this to the other extreme, and that's that female villains. Are the worst of the female qualities in that they're usually seductive.
Yes.
And they use their seductive lures to entrap.
Oh yeah,
it's an interesting.
No, not wrong on that at any particular level.
Because Wonder Woman, I don't think uses.
It's interesting that you say seduction because there's an interesting kind of parallel with a lot of her villains at the end of the day, which has to do with like mind control. So it's just kind of interesting actually when I was doing the research for this. It's actually pretty interesting that a lot of Wonder Woman's villains actually are, in a lot of cases, are not just brawny sort of individuals. A lot of them are doctors, scientists, archaeologists, of some quality of academics at the end of the day.
People who are brilliant.
People who are smart and intelligent, and yet villains at the end of the day. So, I mean, and we'll talk about that when we get to her villains here. But Marston, kind of a cool cat for what he was doing back in the 1930s and 40s.
And what's interesting is I had always envisioned that somehow Wonder Woman was created as sort of a sexual object for men who wanted to see a strong woman, but because she's very sexualized. And I never dreamed that she was created actually to empower women and empower girls to see themselves and their future differently. So I'm really impressed by that.
Well, and now keep in mind that Marston's the one who came up with the character and wrote for the character during up until 1947 when he unfortunately passed away of cancer.
Uh-huh.
But it was a guy named H.G. Peter who actually drew the character for the comic books. And so I imagine a lot of, Marston also was really a big proponent of, like, beauty is strength at the end of the day as well. And, that you could have this beautiful person at the end of the day that was equally just as strong, which is, and his design for the original costume, which is the red strapless top and, originally what was originally a blue skirt with stars on it.
Yeah.
Because she was in America. She was supposed to be like the analog.
Captain America. I always thought
yes, it's kind of meant because it came out the same year actually.
Yeah, so I always figured that was kind of.
There's supposed to be analogs for that.
Yeah.
She was meant to actually copy Superman being the all American kind of thing here when Superman wasn't necessarily that just yet at all. So I mean. Within some reasons. So, I mean, like, we could talk about a little bit about the comics history here before we talk about the character herself.
Okay.
So, Wonder Woman debuted in 1941 in All-Star Comics number 8. And since 1942, she has had her own solo comic book series up till today, even. I mean, like, it's run continuously. There was a short break in 1985 for a few months, but she's been in continuous sort of circulation in monthly publication in her comic books for literally, almost 80 years now.
Yeah, I'm looking at an article that talks about 75 years of Wonder Woman.
Mm-hmm. So when we get to, Marston continued to write for Wonder Woman until 1941. A lot of his stories were, especially with Marston, were pushing very much a feminist agenda in a lot of cases, a lot of empowerment, what we would consider today a radical progressive women agenda, which is not unusual considering that you had a lot of the suffragette and stuff kind of happening during that time as well. Marston, however, was also a little weird in his writings as well. A key example of this was that, at one point here, one of Wonder Woman's weaknesses is that if she was chained up or ensnared by a man, that she would lose all of her powers. And there's a big thing with, like, bondage at a certain point in Marston's original comics, where, like, Wonder Woman would get tied up in either chains or stuff like that. I mean, Marston himself thought that bondage, when done correctly, was a safe thing to practice with other people. So, I mean, like, again, weird guy.
Well, okay, how does that work into the lasso of truth?
Well, again, keep in mind, I mean, like, the lasso of truth is kind of where a lot of that comes from. If you create the lie detector, I mean, like, the truth that a lasso that imbues with pure truth.
When you said lie detector, I'm thinking, okay, so one of her key things is the lasso of truth.
Mm-hmm. So, after that point, however, once Marston unfortunately passed away, a lot of the kind of semi-radical feminist sort of agenda was eventually sort of toned down. Some of the more kinkier stuff that would have been
kinky.
I don't know a better way to describe it.
Okay.
So again, Wonder Woman started getting toned down a little bit more.
Yeah.
And so what ended up happening here is that by the 1960s, they started rewriting her character a little bit as far as the origin story, and started adding a lot more of the Greek mythology sort of elements on there. Because we think
women of Amazon.
Yeah, because we think of a lot of that, as being originally a part of Wonder Woman, and it wasn't until later, nearly 2 decades later, that a lot of it started getting mixed in with sort of the Greek god pantheon.
Actually, my favorite part of the first movie was that whole.
Oh, you'll love her origin story then, because she's got a couple of them.
Oh, okay.
It's actually been a real issue with the comics, is that Wonder Woman's technically supposed to be a golem.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but I'll explain a little bit more when we get to her origin, because it keeps changing based off of who's in charge of the writing, and as well as we have to talk.
Whereas Superman's always from Kryptonite.
Yeah, and and again, it's super interesting. It's like Superman and Batman stories, despite the retcons and the way the universe has been changed over the many courses of years of different events, has been consistent where Batman is Batman because
he's an orphan.
Because he's an orphan because his parents got shot because of crime in Gotham. And, Superman is Superman because he came from a dying planet of Krypton, landed in Kansas, and became an all-American boy, and thus he's a good guy.
Yeah.
Thus Superman.
Yeah.
Wonder Woman's kind of history bounces back and forth.
By the way, I want to tie that to the Bible again. To me, it's the it's the hospitality story of Abraham.
Mm-hmm. Well, again, Superman created by two Jewish guys.
Old Testament.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So by the 1960s, again, they change up her story a little bit. At one point here, by the end of the 60s, they actually depowered Wonder Woman. So at a certain point here, Wonder Woman was only Wonder Woman in name. She didn't have the lasso of truth or any of her powers or even the iconic costume anymore, because the Amazons apparently went to a pocket dimension or world in which they felt they would be safe there, and she had to give up her powers in order to stay with the world of man. And so she ended up getting schooled in martial arts, weapons combat, and a lot of her stories she ended up opening a boutique, and a lot of her stories ended up cycling around espionage and martial arts, this sort of stuff, which was also very popular in the late 60s, early 70s as well.
Yeah, and Bruce Lee.
You get a lot of that also in Marvel, where you had a lot of characters like Luke Cage and another guy that hit stuff with his fist really well, like a lot more martial artsy sort of characters getting out there. It wasn't until Linda Carter in the 1974 version of Wonder Woman that they actually, repowered, Wonder Woman into being the classic form that we know now.
Yeah.
And so we can thank, and we can also thank the show for kind of like stabilizing Wonder Woman's wardrobe, because for a long time, Wonder Woman's outfit eventually moved from like the Stars and Stripes or the Stars skirt, and eventually moved into briefs, and eventually started getting high cut briefs. I don't know.
Well, the best. I'm looking at Linda Carter. Those are not real high cut. I guess they're
briefs.
They're definitely briefs with stars on them.
Mm-hmm. But later incarnations, the briefs get higher and higher, to like Playboy Bunny esque sort of levels, I think.
Well, but here's an early Wonder Woman, and they're very definitely granny panties.
Mm-hmm. Depending on the comics in the late 40s, 50s, and 60s, like they were like spats almost, or shorts, or boy shorts in some cases.
Well, yes. Okay, so I'm looking at
like various Wonder Woman throughout the universe. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking at one that shows like literally 10 different Wonder Women over time. It starts out as sort of a slightly gathered star skirt. Mm-hmm. And then goes to a straighter skirt, and then we get panties. And then we go back to with Gal Gadot again, a skirt.
Yeah, so
almost a Romanesque looking skirt.
Well, in the Jim Lee sort of
like Centurion.
Yeah, or Gladiator.
Yeah.
So in 2016, when they did another revamp of the character, because God knows we can't have enough of those. Jim Lee redid the character, and in the process, kind of envisioned kind of a Romanesque gladiator sort of thing, which has been kind of the most prevalent version that we've known since, as far as the character goes. But going back to our own history here, at one point in 1985, they were going to get rid of Wonder Woman.
Well, why?
Because they're
So this is the time period you said that she wasn't written for several months.
There wasn't written for a couple months. They were actually thinking of getting rid of Wonder Woman because her comics were not doing very well at the time.
Okay.
But she had lost quite a bit of popularity after a big event, which is called a crisis, which was Crisis on Infinite Earths. And I actually want to explain a little bit of DC because we really haven't got into a lot of DC comics especially when we talked about like Batman. We really didn't go into
So the Marvel universe and the DC universe.
So there's the Marvel universe and the DC universe, and some of the things that happen in there when they have big sort of like publication-wide changes. They do it in what they call what we call crisis events.
Okay.
And it's usually in the sense to do one of three different things: either radically change certain characters and get rid of some characters, either change up the way the universe kind of works on a certain level, or to explain kind of how something works on a universal level here in some cases. So the first one, which was one of the things you have to know about one of the things you kind of have to know about DC Comics is there is the multiverse.
Right.
And so what had happened is that very early publications of in the 1940s included characters like Wonder Woman, Batman, Superman, The Flash, Green Lanterns, and other incarnations of this. But later comics reused these characters and had new versions of them. So, as an example, if you remember The Flash, if he kind of looks a lot, there's some versions where he looks very much like Hermes at the end of the day,
right,
with kind of the silver hat and wings on his head.
Yeah.
And then there's the more classic version where we know him as the giant red jumpsuit at the end of the day.
Right.
There was a version of Green Lantern where he actually held a Green Lantern, didn't necessarily have the ring, but was in like an all red and black suit with a little Green Lantern emblem on his chest. Later revisioned as like this green sort of martial cop sort of figure in later versions. What they decided to do there... Ryan Reynolds. And the way DC decided to rationalize, well, wait a second, how does Wonder Woman interact with this Flash but also interacted with that Flash as well? And they said, oh, well, that was a multiverse. And it's not unsimilar to where Marvel has kind of a similar multiverse sort of thing happening as well. It's just that...
Even Batman sort of has a multiverse.
Oh, no, and yeah, Batman has the largest multiverse of all. There's so many different incarnations of Batman that, like, it boggles the mind sometimes when you think about it. But for DC's purposes here, they said there was an Earth 1, which is kind of the main continuity of everything that's happening, and then there was an Earth 2, where all these older Superman, Batman characters existed, as well as some other characters as well, and that the two of them didn't initially really interact a lot with each other, but it was kind of the way that they explained it.
Yeah. Well,
Crisis of Infinite Earths basically decided, you know what, let's not have the multiverse anymore. Let's just have one continuity, and we're going to simplify everything, just say this is the one continuity. And so over the course of a couple months and all these books all kind of going over the same thing at once, they basically blew up the universe, kind of blew up the multiverse, and everything got consolidated into one singular reality. So no more multiverse, everything got brought down to a single element here.
But the multiple universes still have to exist in some sort of past because they...
Nope.
Oh, okay.
Not according to DC. Although the Superman and Lois Lane of Earth 2, the Superboy Prime, and then also Alexander Luthor, which is kind of the son of Lex Luthor from Earth 3, all moved in kind of to a pocket dimension where they could oversee everything and watch everything. I know it's weird. But
you can justify anything.
But one of the weird kind of interesting fallouts of the initial Infinite Crisis was that Supergirl died, which is how you knew the stakes were real. Hal Jordan, who was the Green Lantern at the time, his city got destroyed and he started going a little crazy, which led us to the next big crisis event, which was 0 Hour Crisis in Time in 1994. This is where Hal Jordan became a bad guy called Parallax by basically murdering and stealing all the other Green Lantern rings. in an effort to change time, to go back to a time in which his city existed, and he could go back in time again and fix everything into the world that he wanted it to be. He was defeated by the Earth superheroes, but as a result here, really what Zero Hour was really meant to do was to actually fix Crisis on Infinite Earths, because they had merged all these realities together but didn't really explain the timeline of when events happened at all. So Zero Hour not only was meant to fix their errors from 1985, nearly a decade later, it was meant to be like, okay, this is the time frame in which everything happened now. These events happened here, these events happened here, and then these events happened here. And so it's really not...
to fix everything.
To kind of fix the way the timeline works. So they... Basically, at the end of the day, they kind of...
So what happens 5 years from now when they decide to change it all again?
They do that a couple times here.
Okay. Just ask.
Oh no, yeah, no. It's been one of these ongoing things where a lot of the DC fans are not happy with how DC keeps reconfiguring their continuity, because they keep trying to make it as topical and timely as possible. So I mean, like, and again, like in Zero Hour, the intent was to say everything happened, all these major events that happened just within the last 10 years, versus in Marvel continuity, when they have events that are happening, they're typically avoiding tying them to actual timelines or stuff, but they always used to say like, oh, when did it happen? A couple of years ago. Well,
how do you explain Winter Soldier?
A couple of years ago. When did again, so as an example here, we think of Captain America as
the collection of the Infinity Stones.
A couple of years ago.
But they go back like 30 years, 40 years to collect some of the Infinity Stones.
In the movies, yes. In the comic books...
Okay.
In the comic books, they've always kind of said, the logic has always been like, oh, when did Captain America get unfrozen? A couple of years ago.
Okay.
Well,
I mean, at the end of the day, really, the thing is that you need to make your comic book heroes recognizable and still keep them relevant to the current time period.
Oh no,
and so this process is really necessary.
It's kind of necessary, but it's kind of not, because again, I mean, like in Marvel's case here, like, they don't necessarily tie. I mean, they always keep they keep the story kind of whenever the story is happening. So if it's happening in 2010, it's kind of happening in a similar time frame that is 2010 as far as technology, society, things like that. Like, and again,
so it's true to the time.
It's true to the time period. Again, like as an example here, like Iron Man, is based primarily off of the Vietnam War. They've kind of changed it a little bit to be more like the Middle East wars and like Afghanistan and things like that. And they've done some retcons, obviously, with a lot of these characters as well. But the conceit in Marvel has always been like, when did this happen? A couple of years ago. And they purposely go out of the way to not really set anything at a particular time and place at all, so that it doesn't necessarily matter. Like, these events happened 30, 40 years ago, but like, you can talk about the events and be like, oh yeah, that was a couple of years ago, first,
without being specific,
without being super specific. And
okay. But I think where you see, and I'll bring this back to Wonder Woman, but I'll start with P.D. Parker.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the Spider-Man that was in the daily comics, because realize that some of this stuff was in daily comics that we would read. It was the only part of the newspaper I'd read when I was 7, 8, 9, 10 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And you had Dick Tracy, who I assume no longer exists.
He actually still publishes comics.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. He was cool. He had the first Apple Watch.
Mm-hmm.
So you had P.D. Parker, you had Superman, you had various comics that appeared in 10 frames on Sunday and 4 or 5 frames during the week,
mm-hmm.
and told a continuous story. One of them being the story of King Arthur. That was very popular at that time too. And the P.D. Parker that was in those comics would not be appealing now. But Spider-Man now, and Aunt May being a young woman who's taking care of Spider-Man rather than Spider-Man taking care of Aunt May,
mm-hmm.
All those things are much more understandable and much more relevant to today's time period. It just wouldn't sell any other way. I thought the movie Kazam did a nice job of that.
Oh yeah, no, yeah.
In the same way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In the same way, bringing it relevant to now, because the storyline that was there for then
wouldn't necessarily track.
Wouldn't be relatable.
And so much as that the characters wouldn't really exist properly these days either. I mean, like if we look at the more recent Spider-Man stuff here, what they've done as far as the Daily Planet's concerned is that they've kept Spider-Man as a high schooler for the most part, but they've said that the Daily Planet's no longer a newspaper publication. It's actually a online. It's kind of like an online thing now, circa like Alex Jones or the Young Turks or something along that.
Right.
You know?
Well, I think online has killed comic strips that were published daily.
Oh, very much true. Because a lot of those are now online, and you don't have to, but I think I don't know how much that's...
You binge read them, and it's different. It's different.
Well, not only so much you binge read them, but I think that, I wonder how much that's actually truly affected these comic book writers, or these comic writers, for, like, Garfield and not necessarily Peanuts, because that's unfortunately been done since 97.
But Burke Breathitt has come back out with Opus.
Yeah.
Or what, I forget exactly what that's called.
What's the one Office guy? I want to say it's Drew, but it's not. It's
I know who you mean. I can even see him in my head.
Yeah. I mean, you know who I'm doing. Yeah. Dugbert or something like that. Or,
Digbert.
Digbert, yeah. So, I mean, I'm curious to see for that kind of industry, because, you would think that all these newspapers had to buy those comics from those guys at the end of the day to have something to put in their newspaper. Whereas now, I mean, do they still buy those comics at all? If they do have it online, I mean, do you really need to sell it there or at all to begin with, I think.
Yeah, it's a thing of the world's changed. But to bring this back to Wonder Woman, my original point was that the Wonder Woman that was Linda Carter, who was very clearly black and white, right and wrong, and I don't think we see right and wrong, black and white anymore.
No,
I think we tend to see more. It is more nuanced and lots of gray and lots of subjectivity now in right and wrong.
Well, I think in a lot of cases that as adults, it very much as children, we need to know what's right and wrong, and we look up to our heroes and we look up to the things we look at all the time to say what's right and wrong, to give us that sort of thing. But as adults, as we grow up, we rationalize there's no really right and wrong in this. There's clearly some stuff that is yes and no. I mean, you don't drive through a red light, sort of stuff here. But there are some more nuancy sort of stuff here. It's well, if I take this route to work, it's the quickest route because it's going to waste the least amount of gas. Versus if I go this route, it's going to take me a little bit longer, but I'm going to get through the traffic much easier. Sort of thing. There's some nuance there's a lot more nuance in the world than we, especially as adults, we expect there to be more nuance in some of the media that we watch. Because again, I mean, when we look at some of the Marvel movies here, there's quite a bit of nuance in a lot of these characters. Where, I mean, if we look at the original Iron Man, I think is a good example here. Tony Stark basically saying, we're not going to allow, we're not going to have, these weapons anymore, and, Obadiah Stane being wait a second, you mean we're going to stop doing the thing that's made us rich?
Yeah.
Are you crazy? You're going to destroy the company. It's no, we're going to do something else. No, you have to do arms sale. That's what our backbone has been at for the last,
creating his own villain.
2 decades,
Yeah.
And then the fact that, that he gets to the point where he's trying to create these new mass weapons so that he can continue to do sales and everything. Even if we go back to the more recent stuff here, Thanos at the end of the day is not wrong in his logic at the end of the day, that the universe has a finite amount of resources and that there's overpopulation amongst the universe.
Talk to the Mayans.
Yeah.
Who did themselves in the same way.
But again, I mean, it's just that if we look at the way he goes about everything here, it's well, you're not wrong, but you're just going about it the wrong way. Because it's this very easy way to just kind of snap your finger and be like, great, make all these new renewable resources that last forever so you could have overpopulation. Versus that if you just wipe out half the population, well, that population is going to grow at some point again. You're going to have to do that again, a couple, and
every once in a while you're going to have to Noah's Arcus.
Yeah.
So I think it brings forward the point that there was a time in which we not only would accept but actually wanted our villains and our heroes to be very clear cut. Yes. That's how we saw the world, and that dates back to times of the Cold War. Mm-hmm. And I think with the end of the Cold War and the Berlin Wall coming down, it demanded that we recognize both sides.
Yes.
And anymore, our villains tend to be somebody that we can
sympathize or understand why they
relate to, and they're given a backstory. And they didn't used to be given much of a backstory.
No.
And they didn't need one, and we didn't want one. We wanted them very clear cut. And the same is true of our superheroes, because I think in the first Wonder Woman movie that came out in
2016, 2017.
Yeah, so you and I and John and Pop went and saw it on Father's Day.
Yep.
And that year, and Wonder Woman is sort of given choices and making choices, and you see what goes into her mind as she's
also a little bit more naive as well.
She's very naive. She's very naive, and you see her eyes being opened, and you understand her rather visceral response to what man is. And it is, of sorts, if you go back to the beginning of the film, of sorts it ties with sort of why all the men have been kicked out of Amazon.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense why that ended up happening.
And all, but we demand that. I think in today's world, we demand that we understand why.
Yes.
And we won't accept heroes that are just all evil and
all good
and all good.
We expect them to have, and really what I think actually symbolized that was probably more Marvel comics, because we can see a lot of our characters have vices at the end of the day, or are not perfect. I mean, like, as much as Captain America is meant to be, the perfect human soldier at the end of the day, he's a guy literally at a time in which, like, a lot of his thought and rationale process is based off of a 1940s, 1940s World War II era sort of logic at the end of the day. Yeah. Tony Stark might be my favorite example is really actually the Fantastic Four, because when you look at the Fantastic Four, you have Mr. Fantastic, which is meant to be this upstart, not this upstart, but more of this stern father figure in the mold of like a 1950s sort of sitcom almost. But his superpower is to be the most flexible man of all, which is not what a stern 1950s father figure would be. You have the Invisible Woman, which is, which the character itself is a very preening sort of like Madonna sort of like esque character, where she loves to do fashion. And a lot of her, her hairstyle changes literally from comic to comic in some cases.
So I'm laughing at the moment at the use of Madonna, because I understand. My first thought was Madonna. My first thought when I think of Madonna is
the singer.
No.
Oh, no.
It's the Theotokos, is the Virgin Mary.
Oh, okay.
The Madonna.
Oh, okay.
But then I realized very quickly, I made the adjustment very quickly, that Madonna is the reference to the 80s, 90s rock star. Mm-hmm. Like a virgin.
Well, a little bit, yeah.
And totally get the use as an adjective. It's just interesting that the meaning of the word between our generations has changed so violently.
Yeah.
Okay. Because Madonna, the several times married
pop artist,
who I've seen live on stage, and
has gone through again her own radical transformation, literally
several times.
Several times, yes.
Yes, which I think is virtuous. Is a whole lot different than the Virgin Mary.
But far more different.
And so therefore, I need to stay relevant again to the time that you're in.
No, but this is a good example because again, I used a phrase that. I'm glad we made the analogy here because again, I used a phrase in which you thought it was something different, and I'm glad we were able to clarify that.
Oh no, I very quickly realized what you were talking about. So. But you're right. Mm-hmm. We went through and some of that again is a reflection of the time periods we go through when little girls were being dressed like Britney Spears.
God,
you remember that?
Yeah, and it's still quite the fetish amongst in porn for the most part too. Is the naughty schoolgirl? It's literally a costume you can buy every Halloween. Is the naughty schoolgirl?
Oh gosh, it's on 2.5 Men. Yeah, just saying.
Yeah.
I remember dropping you off for school, your freshman year of high school, and seeing this girl walk up in a tulle skirt with a cropped top, a see-through tulle skirt with a cropped top, and you could see the sort of bikini bottoms underneath. And I thought, A, she bought that with babysitting money, and her mother doesn't know she owns it, and B, she'll be sent home, and forced to change. But it was and she had the pigtails with the ribbons, and it was very much a Britney Spears look.
Oh, I remember back in high school where the spaghetti strap tops, I guess, were becoming a big deal.
Yeah.
And you would show, and the bra strap would show inevitably because of the fashion.
Bra strap showing is not a big thing. When I was a girl, you could not let that happen.
No. And even in high school, it was still kind of a semi-taboo sort of thing, and it's obviously grown to the sense of being like, whatever, sort of thing here now. But again, I mean, like obviously, times change.
Times change.
To bring it back to the entire, back to the Wonder Woman and the crisis events here, just because I want to go through them as super quick as I can. You then had Infinite Crisis in 2005, again another 10 years later, in which they said, you know what, that multiverse thing, we should bring it back. And they did.
It makes sense.
It really does in a lot of cases, like, how do you, because beforehand what they were saying was that, like, like the Batman animated TV series of the mid-90s, which was very popular.
The one with Mark Hamill?
Not necessarily the one, the one with Mark Hamill as the Joker and Kevin Conroy as Batman.
Yeah.
Like, again, who would have thought, Mark Hamill, the ultimate babyface in Luke Skywalker, ends up becoming the greatest voice of a villain ever.
He actually voices a number of things.
Oh, he really does. Yeah, no, he is quite.
And just some applause for the Grubhub. Are they Grubhub or DoorDash?
Uber Eats.
Uber Eats.
I love those commercials.
Oh,
I wanted
best.
more. I wanted more. I want more of those commercials, but But now I want like if different characters in there. Like I want it to be just as silly as that. Like the ones with the guy with the newer ones with the gymnast and
just doesn't work.
No, it
doesn't. We don't know who he is well enough.
Or we don't know who he is enough. But I mean, I'm sure I didn't know who either one of them really were at a certain point until it got explained to me. But I mean, like, I think it's very easy to see Mark Hamill and Patrick Stewart and be like, oh,
everybody knows who that is.
Everyone knows at least who Mark Hamill is as Skywalker, and everyone at least knows who Patrick Stewart is either as like Captain Picard or as like Professor Xavier or whatever other roles he's been in. Like those are easy kind of C's at the end of the day.
See my next version of that somehow has Wolverine and the Hulk or some sort of match of superheroes from different, like maybe a DC superhero and a Marvel superhero. I think that would be the next step.
Oh, I would definitely do Hugh Jackman and Christian Bale.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Perfect.
Or if you want to be if you want to go hyper crazy on it, it's Arnold Schwarzenegger and Stallone.
This would be really good. Yeah. No, both would be iconic.
Yeah. And again, you have them kind of dressed.
And maybe that's the deal. It has to be iconic.
Well, I don't know necessarily it has to be iconic, but it has to be relevant, or it has to be something where you can immediately like
make the link,
connect with the characters, obviously, and then once you connect with the actors and what they're portraying is like, oh, I like Arnold Schwarzenegger, I like Stallone, I like I like these other things. I mean, like, I'm really waiting for the day in which they finally just decide to go animated on this and get and get like SpongeBob versus like Bugs Bunny or something like that,
and have them deliver Krabby Patties.
Krabby Patties, it's like, today
carrots.
I'm having X, Y, and Z Krabby Patties, and I'm having X, Y, and Z carrots. And they have them interacting with each other, a la or Mickey Mouse and Bugs Bunny, and do it similar to how you did Roger Rabbit.
Except we've never seen Mickey Mouse eat.
That's true.
Just say. Okay, so back to Wonder Woman.
So back to Wonder Woman. So Infinite Crisis saw back the rewound and basically said, yeah, the multiverse exists again. Final Crisis was the big crossover event where Batman theoretically dies. And you got rid of like the big bad guy, which was Darkseid, which is analogistic to Thanos, I think, at the end of the day. Yeah. The next one, which is probably going to happen in movies sometime in the next decade, is going to be what they call Flashpoint. So Flashpoint is actually this really cool bit, and they actually made a really good movie out of it too, where the Flash is the Flash. One of the reasons he became the Flash was that his mother was killed by a criminal when Barry Allen was like 7-8 years old or so. Not too dissimilar to how Batman happened, but Barry Allen still had his dad. And so Barry Allen, who is the Flash, has the ability to go at supersonic speeds. He actually also has the ability that if he runs fast enough, he can actually travel through time. And so he goes back in time and decides, well, I really want to see my mom. Oh, I know, let me go back and save her. I could probably do that now. Well, as a result of saving his mom, you ever heard the phrase the butterfly effect?
Oh, yes. I'm a big believer in this.
So the butterfly,
you change one thing, lots of other things change.
Yeah, so the notion of the butterfly effect is that a butterfly flaps its wings, which causes wind, which can change the notion of like weather patterns and all this other stuff. It's basically that the smallest little detail that changes something that gets changed could change a pantheon of other things that happen at the end of the day.
So my favorite example of the butterfly effect is Back to the Future.
Oh yes, that's a very great. It's the best example of that, really. I think is especially in part 2, where like the simple act of taking a magazine back, the almanac of all the sports, literally changes the entire history at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And so there's so that's a great example of the butterfly effect for people out there. It actually creates a very again. If people get a chance to, they should definitely watch the Flashpoint animated direct-to-DVD movie that came out. It's about an hour and 15 minutes, and it's perfect because, like, as an example here, like it's the Wonder Woman and the underwater Atlanteans with Aquaman. They are literally in a war for the control of the world. Cyborg is the world's greatest hero, and the Batman mythos story is actually reversed, because instead of Bruce Wayne losing his father and mother, Thomas Wayne and Martha Wayne, they actually lose Bruce, who gets shot instead. And so Thomas Wayne becomes a very dark, violent, gun-toting version of Batman, and Martha Wayne becomes the Joker.
Ooh. Okay.
So it's really interesting. In this version of a
can we do an episode on that?
I might be able to find some of the stuff on that. I mean, like, I'll definitely link the video for this, because again, it's an interesting kind of take on it. But what ended up happening was that as a result of Barry Allen going back in time, at the end of the story, he runs back in time and actually stops himself from going back and seeing his mother. And originally this was meant to all just be a simple self-contained story, but what ended up happening was that they decided, you know what, actually, that was actually kind of cool. Why don't we just redo everything? And so
see where that universe takes us.
Yeah. Well, not necessarily that particular universe, but I mean, they go back in time and they fix it so that everything returns back to normal. but everything changes a little bit. And so this is where we got the new 52 in the early 2010s, in 2011, 2012. The new 52 was meant to be a rebrand, literally publication-wide relaunch of every single series starting from number 1. And it was meant to redesign a lot of the mythos and legends of all these different characters. So during the course of the New 52, they actually cut out from continuity a bunch of stuff that previously happened in the past. So everyone, the New 52 is basically the notion that everyone's kind of only been around for the last 5-ish years or so. And so all this stuff that
which gets rid of any idea of aging too, if you're human, if you started out as human.
Yeah, well, a lot of the aging got rewound. A lot of the characters got either depowered or brought back to kind of their more baser version. This was the example, the New 52, where you had Barbara Gordon, who was the original Batgirl,
right?
Became Oracle, which was a really kind of interesting thing because she was still this very intelligent person and basically was leading her own superhero team called the Birds of Prey, and was very much a very empowering character of women being in technology and being intelligence brokers at the end of the day.
So she's a STEM gal.
Yeah, but she was also in a wheelchair due to the events of being Batgirl.
Okay.
And so that even though you were and especially for disabled people, that you still have a lot to offer the world. It just may not be athletics. It just may not just necessarily running and jumping up and down buildings or doing anything. But people who had a lot of disabled people really were upset with the New 52 because they made Barbara Gordon able to walk again.
Oh.
And they made her Batgirl again, even though other people had the chance to be Batgirl at this point. It was kind of interesting to see new people take to do that. So, the New 52.
Okay.
Then there's also Convergence, which is a really, really horrible one that everyone says. Basically, the Convergence crisis event in 2015 was the intention that they were going to say that continuity didn't matter anymore. It was this initiative called DCU where we don't care about continuity anymore. So long as it's a great and interesting story, that's what we care about. Not realizing that despite the fact that these are comics primarily aimed at tweens and teens, prepubescent teens and teenagers, it's mostly
a large following of young adults at this point.
Yeah, a majority of the comics I really do think is now realistically aimed at people who in their 30s and 40s. I mean, especially if we go back to the 90s, where there was a lot of dark and gritty and hard line. Batman is more dark and violent. Superman dies. All this dark storylines. Was really a response to the fact that a lot more adults were reading these comics that had grown up with the comics, and they were expecting their characters to grow along with them. So that's why they got a lot more darker in the 90s.
Well, and I will tell you, I will link this to a couple of things. First off, because of technology, we have a lot more leisure time.
Oh yes.
Because as the creator of Wonder Woman pointed out, technology will mean that there isn't as much housework.
Mm-hmm.
We're not washing clothes by hand. We've got refrigerators. We've got meal services. We've got DoorDash.
We literally have a pocket computer, we have a computer in our pocket that can tell us any known information around the universe and can play Angry Birds at the same time.
Exactly. But the other big difference here that has changed, I was reading an article about this recently, that has changed how much leisure time we have, is the fact that couples are getting married older,
mm-hmm.
whereas it would be quite typical to marry in your early to mid-20s. Now it's quite typical to marry in your early to mid-30s. Where you might normally be having children in that era between 24, 25, and 30, you're now having children in your 30s and early 40s. So you have a great deal more leisure time now in your 20s, moving into your 30s, than you would have had even 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I look at kids in your dance group, and when they got married, a couple got married right after college, but many of them just got married in the last couple of years.
Yes.
And that's not at all unusual.
No, I think there's a couple more factors beyond just the leisure time. I think it's also the access to a lot of stuff as well has changed.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you go back to your generation, and I don't want to necessarily speak for you in this particular sense, but I think that home ownership was a real big deal back then, not unlike now, and to be able to buy a home, you really wanted to have that family to be able to do that. So you had to have a wife, and you needed to have a husband and wife and children, and that was a bigger part of that. I think there's a lot of more societal factors as well that I think have played into it a lot of time. I think obviously ease of access is really one.
Yeah, your generation has a lot more disposable income because you've waited longer to do those things.
Oh, absolutely, and we also had a lot more easy access to everything as well. I mean, there's a reason why when a lot of TV shows come out now, like as an example, when The Mandalorian was coming out, it's an 8-episode Star Wars series, which is really good.
We need to do something on that. I haven't seen any of it yet.
Yes,
so.
we will.
Okay.
But the simple fact that it was coming out on a weekly basis versus where a lot of the streaming shows are now coming out like, oh, here's everything all at once, so you can just binge watch it.
Okay.
That was really difficult for some people to do.
The whole concept of having time to binge watch. If you have a family, when do you have time to binge watch?
True.
So the whole concept of binge watching, which is a new concept, it really has only existed in the last 10 years.
Oh yeah,
and possibly even less than that, is as well a product of having free leisure time.
Very much so.
So, just saying that's part of this.
Mm-hmm. So the DCU, which came out of the Convergence Crisis event, not very popular because continuity is a big thing amongst comic book nerds. Mm-hmm. The most recent one, which is Dark Knight's Metal, is kind of meant to be like, what if Batman from Dark Multiverses came and beat the crap out of our regular good multiverse superheroes? It's famously it's famous in kind of these weirder depictions of Batman, including
you could do that with Superman too.
You could. The one that kind of came out the most popular out of this was the Batman Who Laughs, which is what happened if Batman and the Joker were the same person.
It's a really interesting concept because I have to tell you of the Civil War to me was one of the best of that series.
Of the Marvel movies?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, no, it really is. There's a lot of people that go about saying that that the real Avengers 2 should have been Civil War because of the nature of all the characters in there.
It asks a lot of questions. I think as a philosophical.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it was very interesting and again, if we go back to the original comics for Civil War, it was the notion of the Superhero Registration Act, and it was the notion of, do we allow do we police vigilantes out there and support them, but they have to give up their identity at the end of the day, or do we let vigilantes still to be vigilantes because their privacy, because having everybody registered and nobody having their secret identities anymore actually leads to more violence and leads to more possibilities of them getting hurt. I mean,
it asked. I mean, the primary question that it asked is it really good and evil?
Yeah.
And I found that a very compelling. It's like recognizing the light and dark in everything, and I found that a very compelling storyline to me.
Oh yeah, and a lot of people honestly do. Again, and again in the movies, the notion is that do you submit to government rule or do you stay true to what is your ideals at the end of the day? Because your ideals clearly at the end of the day maybe was what's best for you, but not necessarily everybody else. Versus by not having any oversight, people don't really know or are capable of trusting you at the end of the day. And that goes back to one of my other favorite stories, which is Death Note, and I love being able to explain to everybody that the real story of Death Note is not necessarily about the chase of Light and L at the end of the day. or Kira and L, depending on how you look at it. But really, it's the notion of which kind of justice is better. Is it societal justice, which is fair and even, and everybody agrees to that justice? Or is vigilante justice better? Because societal justice, everyone's on the same page and everyone agrees with what justice is, but you'll have cases where some people get away with stuff based off our societal justice. Or do we allow vigilante justice to happen where one person gets to decide who lives and who dies at the end of the day, but it may not necessarily contort with what everyone believes as well at the end of the day.
And a good living example of that are things like the murder of Breonna Taylor, on a warrant search that was where detectives weren't truthful.
Yeah.
And woman lost her life, but the detectives got fired, and that's it, and didn't get prosecuted. And that's to me a real good example of, do you have vigilante justice or do you have
societal justice?
Societal justice, because societal justice will justify things.
Will justify stuff and will fail you from time to time.
Yeah. And has failed us a number of times recently, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, versus vigilante justice.
I get why it's failed us. I understand some of the underlying issues and even in some ways agree with them. But although not in that case. But I think it brings up the point that sometimes revenge is revenge, but justice is justice, and sometimes vigilante justice is not revenge.
Yeah. Again, sometimes vigilante justice, again, is interesting in the sense that, well, you're the only one deciding what's right and what's wrong, but what you're saying was right and wrong may not, may not contort with what everyone else is thinking at the end of the day.
So do you have a hero court that decides what qualifies for vigilante justice? Oh, no. It's just another place to take it.
Yeah, but true, but almost all superheroes are vigilantes at the end of the day. I mean, like, the X-Men are vigilantes at the end of the day, despite the fact that they're trying to stop other mutants from, being, bad guys at the end of the day.
Oh, superheroes are all vigilantes. I mean, that's the basis of a superhero.
So, let's talk about the character here. We've talked about a lot of the meta context of what Wonder Woman is. Let's talk about the character finally.
Okay.
So, now again, depending on who is writing and what version they've revamped Wonder Woman in and what her origin story is, what her original origin story is, almost 90, all of them all start in the sense that she was born and raised on what they originally call Paradise Island. Later, they've retconned it to being Themyscira, which is this Amazon island where the Amazons. So the original backplot was that Hercules, the demigod, enslaved all these Amazons and treated them very poorly. And when they rebelled against him, and broke their chains, essentially, they went and found Paradise Island, which was gifted to them by the goddess Aphrodite, and they lived there and were able to continue living there as semi-immortals at the end of the day. They could still die, but they live at the same age as that they've always been at for the most part.
Yeah. They don't age beyond 20, 25.
Between like their 20s and 30s, maybe early 40s.
Yeah.
And the reason why they still wear their bracelets was, which is literally, Wonder Woman's bracelets are called the bracelets of submission, was to show that we might have chains on us, but you're not submitting us at all.
Yeah.
Sort of this empowerment sort of thing. But that's why they continue to wear them for the most part. So everything all starts from there. But again, the origin of how Wonder Woman exists is either as one of which is that she was, is that her mom made her out of clay, and she was brought to life by the gods. So in some incarnations, Wonder Woman is a golem. So made of clay, essentially. Or a homunculus, however you want to call it.
Yeah.
Other depictions have her as being a blessing from the gods, so her mom got pregnant and as a result gave birth to her. Or she's the daughter of Zeus, and thus a demigod.
Interesting theory.
Which is kind of the version that was initially portrayed in the 2017 version. And I think it's kind of, and again, that's going back into more of the Greek mythology sort of aspect of a lot of this here. Again, there wasn't a lot of that Greek mythology in the original version outside of Amazonians, but again, I think when Marston quoted Amazonians here, I think he really was just meaning like, a tribe of women.
Yeah.
Not necessarily this Greek sort of nature to it at all. Because there was not that initial elements to the character originally. So it's one of those three different variations on how Wonder Woman exists, and
I like the idea of a daughter of Zeus.
Yeah, I think it works out. I think it works out well, especially with the Greek mythology aspects of the character.
Yeah.
Almost all the stories all kind of really kind of kick off when Captain Steve Trevor, who somehow is able to get onto Paradise Island.
He accidentally flies in.
I
actually liked how they did that in the first movie.
No, it absolutely. I really do.
Thought that was well done.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. Again, I like the I like the Wonder Woman movie, the 2017. I think it's a good version of the story at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I think, having kind of the clay is a little bit odd for us now. It made more sense back in the day, where Wonder Woman didn't call her a golem and then never outright say it, but that's kind of what she is.
Yeah.
She's a homunculus at the end of the day, if we want to be hyper specific about it.
Yeah.
But it explains more about her power sets and her uniqueness there.
Yeah.
So what ends up happening here is that she obviously leaves Themyscira, and depending on the version, she might be an ambassador or emissary from Themyscira, as the Amazons are thinking about rejoining the world again of man once again, or if they are at least want to have a visualization of it, at least from that particular aspect, or in some cases, she leaves Themyscira and is actually not able to come back at all. So there's some versions where she's
been cast out.
Not necessarily cast out, but it's kind of the notion that once you leave Paradise, you can't get back in.
Oh, sort of an Adam and Eve thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's that analogy to that too. I mean, again, it was called Paradise Island.
Okay.
So there's that. So there's been that logic to the character as well. Her alias is Diana Prince. Still known as Diana when she's not in costume. Her official title is Diana of Themyscira when she's not known as Wonder Woman. And really, Wonder Woman is portrayed as being like the perfect woman at the end of the day. She's strong, and heroic, and courageous, but she's also kind, empathetic, womanly. Again, Marston really did create her with the intention of being like the best woman of all the women here. And what's interesting about this, and this goes back to his personal history that you explained a little while ago, is that he lived in a relationship that was polyamorous. Was there? Well, I guess we don't know, but we assume that there's probably. Trying to think of the tactful way to put this. Yeah. I've been giving this faces like, okay, I'm waiting for this. Let's see where you go with this.
Okay, so I'm assuming that his wives were bisexual.
I have not heard a lot about that, but I mean, like, they did actually, when he died, like, they continued to live together with all their children as well, up until, I think, Olive died in 1986, and then Elizabeth died in 1993 at 100 years old.
Oh, pretty cool.
Yeah, so, I mean, like, good job on her.
Another superpower.
But no, I mean, they continued to live with each other. I would assume probably bisexual at that point, which
would feed the whole concept of having an island full of just women.
Yeah. Oh no, absolutely. And again, I mean, like, it's the nature that, like, again, for the most part here, and again, depending on the writer, Wonder Woman is meant to be the perfect woman at the end of the day. At the end of the day, so. And she's also kind of meant to be the direct mirror to Superman in a lot of cases, too. I mean...
Yeah, that I've always assumed.
Yeah, I mean, it was in the intention to kind of make her in that particular way.
Well, and
and
if you
over
tie
time, they've gotten closer to that.
and if you tie it to the television series came out at the same time that the Superman movies with Christopher Reeves were hot.
Oh, okay.
I
didn't think about that before that, but that would make a lot of sense, actually.
I mean, well, okay. So let me look at the timing, because I have something else open and I want to keep open and show you. But I want
so Christopher Reeves, I think, would have been 1974 and 1978. I want to say.
So here we go. Just a second. Superman. I always assumed that there were counterpoints, specifically because of that timing. Where the original Superman movies, the Christopher Reeve ones. Oh no, none of those matter.
1978.
Okay, so so when was this series? 75 to
74.
74 to 79.
74 for 3 seasons up until just ending at 78. So you can almost think that, Linda Carter's Wonder Woman actually brought about the notion that, like, oh, let's put Superman to film. Maybe that'll work. Because again, the last time they tried that was actually with George Reeves in 1951. And so it had been a good 25 years since they tried to put Superman on the screen. But Superman's also had a fairly well-known sort of, or prolific sort of media career as well too. I mean, like, he's been in a lot of stuff. And actually, what's actually kind of interesting as well is that when the Linda Carter series ended, or actually probably I think midway through, was when they came out with the Super Friends.
Oh,
which lasted for like a good decade as well. It started, I think, in 1975 and ended in 1986.
And that's the cartoon series.
That was the cartoon series at the time too. Yeah. Some things you should know about Wonder Woman is that she's a part of what they call the Holy Trinity of DC Comics. It's Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman. If you think about it from, depending on the history source, Wonder Woman is actually the first person to join the Justice League. Mm-hmm. Batman and Superman wouldn't join until years later. Wonder Woman was initially the secretary. I know, right?
Yeah, well, hey.
Yeah, so
glass ceiling's hard to break.
I know. Yeah, I read that and it was yeah, that makes sense.
Well, and it's interesting because when you think about this series, the Linda Carter series, which comes out 74, 75?
74.
Okay, so in 1973, Title IX just passed, and I was the only girl on the boys water polo team, which was an interesting experience, both good and bad, because people accosted my mother in the grocery store. I've
been reading a Japanese manga on water polo, which has been a lot more enlightening.
It's a vicious sport.
It's known as underwater martial arts.
Yes. There's lots of things going on, and you double your swimsuits because they'll get ripped. Mm-hmm.
Ripped, torn, pulled off.
Intentionally. Oh, yeah, all those things. No, it's a vicious little sport. Although it wasn't for me because they were all afraid of hurting me. But understand that during that time, the constitutional amendment for women's rights was circulating. Went through several iterations before it finally passed. Title IX had just passed. Giving women equal rights to any number of things, but including sports, and it was a time when women's rights were really coming to a fore. You had women like Gloria Steinem, and these different movements. Mm-hmm. Now being the National Organization for Women, which was a big thing in the 70s, and all of those things kind of were part of the engenderment, I think, of that series and its popularity. It was very popular at the time.
Oh no, and I still think it is to this day very popular. I don't. You still see lots of memes out there occasionally with Wonder Woman, and it's. And again, this will go back to when we talk about in media here, Wonder Woman. Because again, this will be a part where I have to lean on you a little bit for its context. But she's the Holy Trinity. Also, kind of interesting as well. Depending on who is writing her, Wonder Woman is either a lesbian, bisexual, or has been in a relationship with Superman for a long period of time. I don't like that storyline because I think it robs both of them of some agency at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Because, you always think of Superman and Lois Lane.
Yep.
Or rather, so much as I always think that, it's Wonder Woman's the perfect woman. You would really think that it would go kind of interesting if she was with a very imperfect man at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Or a man who was trying to be as good as possible, but was somewhat failing in certain aspects, but she could see the goodness in him.
Yeah.
Then that would have been like Captain Trevor here at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Her superpowers, again, which have changed slightly over time, have included super strength, super durability, super speed, super agility, reflexes, a healing factor, which again is the notion that you heal over time.
Yeah.
A lot quicker than more normal people would.
Yeah.
And after the events of Crisis on Infinite Earths, she could fly. Because you think of Wonder Woman primarily as having the invisible jet.
You do.
So, some of her, but outside of those superpowers, she's a master technician, a master in combat, multilingual, an expert pilot, and very wise. Again, obviously, because she's been living for years, for centuries even.
Yeah.
When we get down to kind of some of her equipment here, again, most famously, I think, is going to be her bracelets of submission.
Yeah.
These are originally created out of the legendary Aegis Shield of Zeus, and empower her with the ability to deflect bullets, projectiles, some energy blasts, things like that. You've got the Lasso of Truth, which we've already mentioned before. It's a rope that basically is actually not just beyond the fact that it makes people, or it compels people to tell the truth, so much as that it's strong enough to actually bind people stronger than Superman. It's bound Superman, Shazam, or Captain Marvel, and numerous other characters. So it's actually able to bind them and stop them. If you wrap the rope around Superman can't break it. Mostly because it's also somewhat magical. So magical stuff, Superman has a harder time dealing with magical stuff versus non-magical stuff. So there's that notion there. But okay. I mean, Shazam is primarily a magical, and he can't break it either. So
yeah, there you go.
But also the Lasso has also been capable of showing healing elements and anti-magic properties. So the notion that if you were to wrap somebody around in it, it might cure them of some illnesses or some magical ailments, I guess, maybe. Mm-hmm. She has her golden tiara, which has been dubbed kind of like a boomerang, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
I think that's from the Linda Carter primarily.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Well, I mean, realize in the time that was filmed, you didn't have CGI.
No.
So you had, blue screen, green screen, and that's how that was done.
Oh, yeah. You have the invisible jet. Now, originally, the invisible jet actually was a gift from the Amazonians.
Right.
It was meant to be a Pegasus.
Oh.
So, but
makes sense.
But they had to hide it as the invisible jet to hide a Pegasus.
Right.
And variations on the jet have either been just like a propeller plane or a straight airplane to a jet.
I was always glad that she couldn't fly like Superman.
No, yeah, I thought it added some uniqueness to the character, and then obviously since the New 52 continuity, she is carried around with her a sword and shield, both of Amazonian quality. They're made from the similarly of the same Aegis that from Zeus here, so they're near indestructible for her. Yeah. And then we have the costume.
Which goes back to that picture that I had that shows
the various Wonder Womans and various.
Starts out with sort of a gathered, what would have been a
kind of gathered skirt, I guess maybe.
Well, would have been a skating skirt in the 30s.
Okay.
If you looked up Sonia Henney, it would have been a Sonia Henney style skating skirt, and Sonia Henney being very popular at the time.
Let's see if I found it yesterday. I found a good version of it here yesterday. Oh, okay, so I'm seeing the same one that you showed me originally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's depicting Wonder Woman in various degrees of briefs, skirts. They get higher and higher over time.
Yeah.
So what's interesting about the Wonder Woman here is that originally there was an eagle that was presented on the chest. Mm-hmm. And eventually, actually what ended up happening is in the mid 1980s, when they redesigned the Wonder Woman logo, which was kind of like the W's on top of one another.
Right.
They added that to the costume, so that's kind of on where it's like, I guess, like the cups, the top of the cups of the breast, of where the breast would go. I guess I don't know the best way to describe that.
That's a tactful way.
Yeah, I tried trying to find it. At certain points, she wore sandals instead of boots.
Oh, because I kind of like they're kind of hip looking. Sometimes they cover the kneecap.
Sometimes they go up to the kneecap. Sometimes they're just right under the knee. Sometimes they're like gauntlet boots, maybe perhaps. So originally they were like strappy sort of sandals. They were supposed to be the sandals of Hermes at one point.
Yeah, see, that I would totally get because there was a thing. Yeah, I had a pair, in would have been 1971 of sandals. They were a bitch to keep on that laced up my calves. That was a hot 70s thing.
I will have to take your word for it.
I had really really happening clothes in the 70s. Oh, there we go. Oh my gosh, yeah.
So this is one art. So I will include this picture. This is one artist's take on various ages of the Wonder Woman costume.
Although it doesn't show the skirt, and the skirt clearly was part of the original.
Yeah, but here you can see kind of where it's the very kind
hot
of
pants,
and we're getting closer and closer to briefs, and
then we end up with full on sort of, as you said, Playboy whitey sort of high cut stuff. Yeah.
Which again, when trying to research this, is like, how do I best describe that? Oh, it literally has it right here. It says what it is. So I mean, like, the new 52 actually, when that came out, introduced her with pants. Let me see if I can find a good version of that, because there's not really a good version of that. Yeah, I suppose it's about as good as I'll find here. And again, I will maybe not that one here, but again, they introduced her with pants and kind of a leather jacket sort of. I
saw one with sort of like what I would think of as athletic sort of yoga pants.
Kind of like that, yeah. I mean, like
leggings.
I guess leggings is maybe kind of the best way to describe it here.
With a stripe of stars down the side.
Sometimes they have that. Sometimes they don't. All right, here we go. Let's go with this one here.
But a very athletic sort of more modern look.
Oh, that's.
They've yet to put her in a sports bra.
That's true, but again, I don't think they've ever really I don't think they've really ever shown her with straps on her shoulders either.
I'm just here to say, yeah, there you go. Yes. Wow, that's a pretty sexualized version. Yeah. It is pants though.
It's pants, yes. It's and again, this was redesigned by a very popular artist called Jim Lee. He did Spider-Man for a number of years.
Well, I mean, what's interesting is none of the people drawing her have ever had breasts and had to go take a run.
Very true.
Just saying, because that's not a comfortable thing.
This is a slightly later redesign for all the characters. Again, back to the original kind of element there.
I'm just saying, there's a reason why sports bras exist.
True. I won't doubt that.
Yeah.
The new 52 has also got away with a lot of people wearing underwear, which used to be a way used to, because again, so the reason why Batman and Superman wore underwear on the outside of their thing was that they were meant to mimic circus performers and trapeze artists, which were kind of like Daredevil sort of people that were kind of the basis for these characters.
Yeah.
So I mean, I have a hard time sometimes looking at Superman and seeing him without the red
Yeah.
underwear on the outside sometimes.
Yeah.
It looks a little weird sometimes, I suppose.
Well, because that's our norm for
Superman, yeah.
Batman, same thing.
True.
Batman less noticeable because it's
all black, so it's kind of
black.
more understandable if it's not there.
Yeah.
Wonder Woman has kind of an interesting collection of villains. Like I said before, a lot of her villains are smart. As an example here, her villains fall into two
Smart
different...
as opposed to clever? Because I've always been impressed that Batman's supervillains seem very clever.
They can be clever, but
There's a difference between the two.
There is. Wonder Woman's though tended to be academical in nature initially.
Okay. Well, isn't she a professor though? I mean,
she has hidden herself as a professor.
She's an
at different
academic,
times.
so it would make sense.
Mm-hmm. And again, Marston being primarily around academics as well, would think that would be ideal villains in some cases. So again, they either fall underneath academics or scholarly individuals at certain points. A lot of them are doctors, or characters from either Greek mythology or Greek gods in some cases. So,
which makes sense with the tie-in as well
for a character at this point. Yeah. So as an example here, there's a character named Gigtana or Gigita. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know how quite to say it here. She can change the shape and size of herself, so she can grow to
shapeshifter.
Well, not a shapeshifter, but she can grow to. She can increase her size.
Okay.
So she can be like as tall as like skyscrapers and stuff like that, but still retain.
So not like Hulk.
Not like the Hulk, no. But she can grow to be like 10 feet tall, and strong as a 10-foot tall person, but still just as smart and as intelligent.
Okay.
And very curvaceous as well. All these villains are all very curvaceous women. You have Cheetah, which is what we'll see, I think, in 1984.
Okay.
Originally, it was a woman who dressed as a cheetah to fight Wonder Woman. Modern version of it, though, has this plant god, which I'm not even going to attempt to butcher the pronunciation of the name, that gives cheetah-like characteristics and powers to Cheetah, which gives her increased reflexes, strength, makes her somewhat parallel to Wonder Woman, but with a tail and in full, not just actually looking like a cheetah. Well, you'll see it in 1984.
Okay.
You have Dr. Psycho, who is famously based off of another professor that Marston worked with when he was at Harvard, who was very much the antithesis of what he was, because he was actually very opposed to. This college professor was opposed to women's suffrage and feminism.
Okay.
So as a result, Dr. Psycho is kind of you could see him being played by Peter Dinklage.
I like Peter Dinklage.
I know. He would make a good Dr. Psycho, though.
Okay.
So it's a short, diminutive sort of person with a lot of ego, and his power is controlling minds. You have Dr. Poison, who we saw in the 2017 version of Wonder Woman here. Primarily, a lot of her stuff is actually she created a poison to control minds, but then, she could also have other poisons that did other effects as well.
Yeah.
And then you kind of got the Greek pantheon of gods. You have Ares, who's the god of war, versus Wonder Woman, who's kind of the idealist of peace and not having war.
Yeah.
For a point, Wonder Woman becomes the god of war, which is an interesting storyline.
Yeah, and in Roman, Diana is the god of war.
Yeah, which makes it even more interesting.
Yeah.
There's been versions of the story which have also said that Diana is the daughter of Ares, which is, I think, the 2017's version of the story. You have what is a character called the Firstborn. It's the son of Hera and Zeus, who is apparently destined to sit on the throne after he's killed all the other Greek gods, and obviously Wonder Woman aims to stop him. You have Circe, who's a sorceress, not unlike the Odyssey,
right?
And then you have Medusa.
So we're really mythology based.
Yeah, there's been minotaurs and other things like that have been like mooks at a certain point. And then we get into, some of the various incarnations here. Again, did you know that there was a pilot version of Wonder Woman that came out in the early 70s before the Linda Carter version?
Is this the one with pants?
She's got pants. She's a secretary to Captain Trevor. She has no superpower. She's basic, and she was blonde.
And she was blonde.
I
remember hearing about this.
It was a TV movie with the intention of going into actually as an actual TV series. It did not work, and that's where they had to scrap it and redo it, and then eventually they were able to do the Linda Carter version of Wonder Woman, which we all know from 1974 and 1975, lasted for 3 seasons. And so
only 3 seasons? It seemed to me like it was all longer than that.
Only 3 seasons, apparently.
Really? I'm checking that because it seemed to me like it was all longer.
That was what I had read.
Well, no, you're undoubtedly right.
From there, you've had she's been a lot more prevalent in the animated realm.
It's because it's so well known. Wow. Final episode, 1960. Yeah. Well, okay, so
79, I guess. So maybe just like 4 years.
Seasons.
4 seasons, I guess. Maybe. Okay. So 4 seasons.
Superman follows that, comes after it. So Superman must have been inspired by her rather than the other way around.
Yes. Okay. About 60 some odd episodes.
Okay.
But again, Wonder Woman's obviously been a lot more prevalent in animated stuff here, I think, more frequently. Again, obviously, she was a major founding part of the Justice of the Super Friends, which was, I believe, started in the mid-70s and went to the mid-80s. When the
you guys used to watch Super Friends.
Oh, God, I can't remember.
Vaguely. It's part of the Saturday morning cartoons. Back when they had Saturday morning cartoons. What do children do now on Saturday mornings?
I don't know. It's so weird. I don't know.
Go play soccer.
I remember, again, it was like you would watch cartoons before you went to school. When you came back from school, you did your homework, and then you watched more cartoons. And then on Saturdays...
Darkwing Duck.
Oh, God, I love Darkwing Duck so much. Actually, so speaking of odd tangents, one of my favorite Saturday morning cartoons was always going to be DuckTales. I love DuckTales. Scrooge McDuck is one of my favorite characters. I have this really cool little statuette that you got me for Christmas one year. It's one of my favorite things because I love Scrooge McDuck. They've done a new version of DuckTales, and one of which is that they've said that
Webigail? I liked that they had Webigail.
They have Webigail. Webigail is a lot more vicious in this new version. Actually, she's actually pretty interesting. And what they've done for that one here is that they've reimagined Darkwing Duck as a TV series in the DuckTales universe.
Oh.
Still played by Jim Cummings, who's the same guy who plays Winnie the Pooh.
Okay.
So, the same guy who's done the modern version of Winnie the Pooh also plays Darkwing Duck, and they've since canonized it as a new Darkwing Duck is out there, based off a TV series that now just became real life sort of thing. It's really interesting, and I've been watching this new DuckTales series. It's really good. I recommend anybody to go watch it if they have the option to. So definitely go watch that if you can. But Wonder Woman has also been a mainstay of the animated Justice League universe, which kind of, I think, really started with the 1983 Batman that came out in the mid-90s, and then they eventually revamped it to Batman and Superman, which kind of did a redesign to bring them all in line together of this 50s aesthetic.
Oh.
And then eventually they just aged them up and created the Justice League, of which you have, again, obviously Wonder Woman, Superman, Batman, the Martian Manhunter, Hawkgirl, the Flash, and Green Lantern. As this animated version of this this top 7 people that are like the main Justice League people.
Yeah.
And eventually they've kind of like grown it over the course of, I think it was 1999 until about 2006, in which they had the Justice League cartoons running for. And then she's obviously lived very famously in a lot of... so what DC's really done a really great job of is they've had these direct-to-video movies that they've released. Those go direct-to-DVD that usually tells kind of a storyline of the characters at the end of the day, of these major story plots here. So like you have Flashpoint, which again was one of those ones that I mentioned before. That's one of those direct-to-DVD movies that they had. They've done a number of the Batman stories, like the Red Hood is a really good one.
Red Hood I've seen.
Yeah.
How did I see that?
Probably when we were doing Batman.
Yeah.
But yeah, so there's a lot of them out there, and so Diana, in kind of her a lot of it's all based on the New 52 in a lot of cases. So they have Diana there as well, in a couple of them. And she doesn't necessarily have one that's solely on her own just yet, but she's been a player in a lot of other stories that have happened in those movies. She's very, very prominent there. And then obviously we have the film version here with Gal Gadot, where she first was seen in Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, which is still just a... Who came up with that name? And then you obviously have Wonder Woman, and then you have the most recent version of Wonder Woman 1984, which just finally decided to come out. It was being postponed due to the COVID pandemic, unfortunately. My understanding actually of this movie is that it was originally supposed to come out in 2019 actually, but it got delayed because it was going to go because they wanted to put it up against the Marvel movie Black Widow. They wanted to put it up against Black Widow and Scarlett Johansson. And
that's an interesting pairing, because I was thinking I will rewatch Captain Marvel after watching 1984, so I could compare the two women superheroes.
Yes, and again, when you think about it, the Wonder Woman one came out in 2017 versus the Captain Marvel didn't come out for at least another year and a half or 2 years after that in early 2019. Yeah. So I mean, like
I thought the timing was interesting.
And they beat Marvel to the punch at the end of it. But I'm also kind of I'm much more appreciative of it because I think Wonder Woman has that longer continuity in that particular respect. Yeah. But I mean, like if we talk about just the movies itself, like they should have come out with a Black Widow movie much earlier. But like
I have not seen Black Widow.
It hasn't come out yet.
Oh, okay. That's why I haven't seen it.
Yeah, so it hasn't come out.
I'm just curious to see the different depictions. Mm-hmm. Because in Wonder Woman 1917, she's very gullible and very naive and very much...
2017.
Yes. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but she's very kind of gullible, naive, innocent, looking to what the rest of the world is. There's a very famous scene
unaware of evil. She's just discovering evil.
Yeah, she's really not understanding it at all.
Yeah, she don't understand how man could do this to man, and I'm curious to compare that to Captain Marvel, who seems very street smart.
Yeah, and again, what I find very interesting about Captain Marvel is that, like, again, if we go back to her own timeline, I mean, like, she was a very feminine, submissive sort of character when she was first introduced as Miss Marvel, and then clearly over time, especially going into the early 2010s here, as just being like Captain Marvel as being this much more empowered kind of individual, where like a lot of the future stories, I think in the So I'm going to pause real quickly in the sense that
I got it.
So my mom is knitting because she's really good at knitting, but like this little black ball kind of scurried across the ground and scared the shit out of me.
Animal.
Look, it's like, what the hell?
Has a life of its own.
So apologies there for just kind of startling and having going off on a tangent. That was,
yep.
But no, so like Captain Marvel again. I mean, like, is at this point now, or like, if you replaced it with a guy, would it really be different?
And not a whole lot. Yeah. So this goes back to when you make women into superheroes, what feminine qualities do they lose? Mm-hmm. Captain Marvel really in the movie has no real love interest. No.
I no real love interest, but I would even go further to say that, like, there's not really a whole lot of femininity to the character,
Other than her form.
other than her form, and maybe a little bit of her personality at the end of the day, as being kind of this like little fiery hothead sort of kind of individual.
Yeah. Very sparky.
Sparky.
But
again,
her costume, her superhero costume is there's nothing.
There's nothing feminine in regards to it outside. Now
it's very actually I find it very androgynous.
Yeah. It's not until slightly later incarnations, and I think this is a little bit seen in the Marvel Endgame, where she has a sash across her waist now.
Yeah.
Which is kind of the most feminine, I think, element of it.
She features so little in there.
She features so little, and she's got this kind of
comes so late.
And she's got this very kind of pixie sort of haircut, and even when even in the moment when like they're all kind of mourning the loss of Tony Stark, like, and they pan through everybody of all these people in like at a funeral, like, she's still in kind of just like a black suit, very masculine at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Which I find to be a little, which I find to be like somewhat empowering for that particular character. But I mean, like, is it really a woman at the end of the day if it's got all those same trappings of a male? And then that's where I think where Wonder Woman is different, where Wonder Woman is very much a lot of the trappings of a lot of femininity into her. Where, like, I don't think you could replace Wonder Woman with as a guy at the end of the day. I think it would be
I think the number one thing about Wonder Woman is she's hesitant to use her force.
Yes,
and so I'm curious to see if they keep that as sort of her standard. She's hesitant to use her force. She's only using it because she needs to save the world. Mm-hmm. So she is very much sort of a Mother Nature sort of figure.
But that comes a lot back with femininity. This notion of nurturing, empathy, kindness, and compassion.
Right.
All qualities in which you would ask for of a woman at the end of the day, or what you would expect of one at the end of the day, at least from societal standpoints, I believe.
Yeah. So I was just thinking I would watch the two with the idea of sort of contrasting them.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting contrast. I really do think at the end of the day. I think that when we look at Scarlett Johansson as Black Widow, and when that movie comes out, I'm very interested to see where it comes from, because there's a lot more female super spy sort of characters in that particular film from what I've seen in the trailers and what I've heard about it. And so I think it will be kind of more interesting to see that movie at the very end of it all, just because I think it'll be interesting to see the dynamics.
That's an interesting character too.
Mm-hmm. Again, the reason she's called Black Widow is because when her original version of the character was a spy, that was a very kind of femme fatale sort of individual, and killed people through seduction. And eventually she transitioned to being, a good guy, and kind of more of a ninja-esque spy, I think is the best way to describe it.
Yeah, because I don't see her character in its current formation as being a femme fatale.
Oh, I see her. I see her kind of in a femme fatale sort of element. I mean, I think especially, I think especially in a couple of the various movies. But it's always been kind of a sub element of her, where it's more or less of kind of like this secret ops sort of individual, which I think is kind of the correct way to kind of move her into. I don't think she's really been a femme fatale since Iron Man 2, which is where she would have been the kind of the femme fatale sort of element and nature to her, I think.
Okay.
So
fair enough.
So there's that. So this is Wonder Woman. I don't know if you want to talk about the cultural significance of Wonder Woman today, because I think we've been going for almost 2 hours now.
Oh, have we? Okay, I will just say the cultural significance of her in the ERA time period, which is the constitutional amendment that gave women equal rights. She was very much in that context in the time that the Linda Carter version came out.
Okay.
So just to give it some color from that end. Now I think she's the embodiment of sort of the movement to recognize that female qualities are equal.
Because I would have thought that initially, like, she was in the same vein of kind of like Rosie the Riveter. In kind of by the time of like the 60s and 70s, I would have said.
Yeah.
Where she's very much this like women can do this too sort of element.
Mm-hmm.
And now obviously I think that there's a push to say that, that she's just as good as the boys, but she's got more to it because she has these other feminine characteristics and qualities to her.
Yeah.
Now, admittingly, I haven't read a lot of the Wonder Woman comics because I'm not the most adept comic book guy at the end of the day. I know about it mostly from knowing about it. When you're a nerd, you kind of know stuff.
Yeah.
I sit at my
She's
computer.
not your choice because she was. I'm delighted that she was created for
women.
For women. Yeah.
Because it doesn't seem like that would be the initial intent.
Yeah, because I always viewed her as being so sexualized. So, but the idea that she would have been created as the perfect woman's form makes sense given that time period.
And I think there's a lot of people that really did think that she was just like, oh, we really should market to girls, so let's make a girl Superman.
It's a very forward thinking, actually.
And that's what they did with Supergirl at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Like, it literally was like, well, let's get the women demographic. Let's make a girl. Let's make a girl Superman at the end of the day, and that had some mixed results, kind of layered in there throughout the years. I mean, there's been incarnations of Supergirl, which has been Power Girl.
Ooh.
Imagine Supergirl, but she wears kind of an all-white leotard that's high-cut briefs, but has a big circle where like a superhero symbol would be.
Yeah.
To kind of show off that she's a woman and that, like, she literally uses it as a distraction for bad guys that are staring at her breasts.
So
she's
also
a
cleavage window.
Oh yeah, very much a cleavage window. Let's see if I can pull one up here real quickly. She's also very militant as well, militant feminism.
But I don't view Wonder Woman as being a militant feminist.
I don't either.
I think Captain Marvel is more of a militant feminist.
I would think. Yeah, I would say I would agree to that as well. Absolutely. I guess this is. I'm trying to find the best picture I can, without being like too crazy here, and so that would be Power Girl.
Oh wow! Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So again,
that is a cleavage window.
Yeah.
there are dresses made now with cleavage windows, cocktail dresses and things.
Oh yeah, no, I think that's not against that. But I mean,
of course you are not.
Of course I'm not. But I mean, like, it's
yeah. No, it's a look.
It's a look. It's a bit.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think next week I really want to. Next week I definitely want to talk about Wonder Woman 1984, but then I also kind of want to talk about kind of the cultural significance about her, because I really don't have a good way of really having a good connection to this at the end of the day. Mostly because, again, it's a character that's not
empowering to you,
not empowering to me, and not meant for me at the end of the day. But it's a very much a character that at the end of the day is very empowering to women at the end of the day. And I imagine
I bought Wonder Woman costumes for my granddaughter's American Girl dolls.
Yeah.
And for them, for my granddaughters. Mm-hmm. And I've seen them, like the four of them, the two girls and the two dolls, all dressed up as a Wonder Woman, flying around a room.
Yeah.
So I get that's its intent, and it has accomplished that in many ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and again, it's cultural. I mean, again, I think it's a much larger conversation that would be much more interesting and educational for me, even at the end of the day, to hear from women what Wonder Woman means to them. And I think what we'll do is we'll talk about that next week.
Yeah.
Because once we get through 1984, I think we'll have quite a bit to say on that too.
Oh, good. So I have something to look forward to.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Okay. Did you like it? We'll talk about that next week.
Yeah, I'll talk about that next week. I'm not gonna bias anybody.
Okay.
No.
All right.
But so we're gonna put all the show notes and all the pictures that we showed here as well between me and Mom. Those all are going to be available on our website at the nerdtutorialpodcast.com.
Including a link to a shawl that you can knit. That is the Wonder Woman double W's.
Yes, it will.
There's a knitting pattern out there, very popular. That is the shawl.
We will absolutely include that as well. And then at the same time here, we also continue the conversation as well at our Facebook group at facebook.com/Nerd Tutorial Podcast. All is one word. And then if you have any ideas, comments, or other things that we're previous topics that we're following, we also follow those on our Twitter at nerd_tutorial. And so if you want to see the latest bits on Pokemon, or, I'm sure we'll have lots of new discussion and topics on Wonder Woman 1984 when we start following that as well on our Twitter page. So you'll definitely be able to see that there. And so, again, our homework here for this week is going to be 1984's Wonder Woman. Definitely a good one here. And again, I'm also going to link Flashpoint as well. It's not homework necessarily, but I think it's a really kind of interesting look at the DC universe from a butterfly effect perspective here.
I'm interested in this.
It's very good. I highly recommend it here. But on behalf of myself and my mom, we hope you guys stay safe out there in these weird times, and we'll see you guys again next time.
Bye.